Hello, welcome to SQL with Python. I did an introductory video on this, and so with that, I was able to introduce the whole idea of SQL and how it's connected to Python and all that. And I mean, I'm very comfortable with Python, so I always like to see how Python fits into every situation. So in this video, our focus is on connecting Python to an SQL database with SQLite. In the introductory video, I already told you that you can connect Python to SQL through SQLite and SQL Alchemy. So as I do this, after this video, I'll be going to talk about how we can do some advanced data management in Python using SQL Alchemy. Okay, so let's focus on this one where we connect Python to an SQL database with SQLite like that. So first of all, let's look at using SQLite 3 to connect Python to an SQL database, right? So the first thing is we want to import the SQLite 3 library. So I mean, you see that we are not installing because SQLite 3 is built into Python. So to interact with SQLite databases, Python requires the SQLite 3 library, and it is included by default in Python. So you don't need to install anything. So you simply import it into your Python code. That's all. So and in this place now. So you have to import SQLite 3 because it's already inbuilt. Import SQLite 3. Okay, so I just come here, I do Control Enter or Shift Enter. So it has run no error, so it means it's imported now. So we can continue. So the next thing we want to do is to establish a connection, right? So if you want to work on the database, you need to connect to the database for sure. So to interact with the database, first you need to establish a connection. So if the database already exists, you connect with it. If it doesn't already exist, you have to create it or something like that. So that's what we are going to see here. So you provide the name of the SQLite database file, and Python will connect to it. So if the file doesn't exist, SQLite will create a new database file, right? So as far as you just keep the name there. So for instance, right, this is my folder where I'm working on, and this folder where I have this code sheet I'm working on, right? So this is the code sheet. Now that's a connection to Python to connecting Python to an SQL database with SQLite. That's what that is about, right? So you can see there's nothing like database, anything here. So for databases like that, SQL database, they always end in DB. So whatever dot DB. So in this case now, you see, I want to connect to SQLite database or create it if it doesn't exist. So in line two, I say, so CONN is just for CONN for connection, right? But it could be anything, right? It could be anything. But that's like a conventional way of doing it. So you can know it's your connection, the connection to the database. So you now have you have connect, which is a function inside the SQLite 3 library, and then that connects you to it's more like reading a CSV Excel file like in data analysis. So but now instead of pandas, you have SQLite 3 dot connect, which is a function in the SQLite 3 library, and then you want to connect to the my database 1 dot DB. All right, so databases end in DB in SQL, they end in DB, just like Excel in when we're talking about pandas ends in XLSX or something like that, or JSON ends in JSON, and CSV ends in CSV. So here, this one ends in DB. So so you connect SQLite3.connect to my database 1.db, which did not exist the last when we checked, right? So, but once I run this, now it has run two as shown here. So it means the database, though it wasn't, if it was there before, it will just connect. If it wasn't there, it will now connect. So if I go into the folder now, you can see we now have my database one. So the database has been created. So just created, I mean, right on time, 12:29, and this is 12:29. So we just created the database. So my database one has been created. So in the above code, my database, okay, it's actually my database underscore 1.db now. Okay. So in the above code, my database 1.db is a database file. If it doesn't exist, SQLite creates it in the same directory. Okay. Then the next thing we want to do, having established a connection with a database, the next thing we want to do is to create a cursor object. So a cursor is an object that allows you to execute SQL queries. So in Python, right? Yeah, if you want to execute SQL queries in Python, you need a cursor object. So you need to create like a cursor object. So a cursor is an object that allows you to execute SQL queries. It acts as a pointer that you use to run SQL commands. All right. So you know what a cursor does in normal computing, right? So like it is, so with it, you move around, you select, you click, and all that. Okay. So, and the way to do that is, I mean, it acts as a pointer that you use to run SQL commands. So here now you create a cursor object, and in line 2 say cursor equals connect to. So that database you connected to now. So you are creating a cursor to connect to that. So you run it and it's established, no error. So we are good to go. So the next thing after creating a cursor object is to execute SQL query. So it's like we are set for the game. So for those who already knew SQL, you can already have an idea what this looks like. And then, I mean, if you're new to it, no worries. We are learning. So this is as fresh as things get also. So except that you're learning two things at the same time, learning SQL and how to use it, how to run it inside of Python. So SQL, execute SQL queries. You can execute SQL commands using the cursor.execute method. For example, you can create a table. So if you want to create a table, you just have, so the cursor you created, right? You say cursor.execute, then create table. So this is how to create a table in SQL in short. So create table. Now, normally if you like in Oracle, right, you just go straight and write this. But because you are doing it in Python, you now need this extra cursor.execute. Then you now have these three. So you now have like a string, like what we saw in when we're talking about commenting in Python, right? So you have these three things to create a kind of string. So you have create table, if not exists user. So you are correct. So if the user table does not already exist, now you are creating it. So you are creating table if not exist, and the table will be called users, and the column, the variables or the columns in the table will be ID, like user ID, then that ID will be an integer and it is primary key. Primary key is a key that cannot be duplicated. So it's more like your fingerprint or your social security number if you're in the US, or your NIN number if you're in Nigeria, and things, or my number if you're in Japan. So those are like unique information that should not be, that it should be, it is unique to its primary key, and it's, it's integer. So then name, which is text, we already saw types of variables inside of SQL. We saw varchar or string. We saw integer and all that. We saw time and timestamp like that. Then name is text and age is integer. So this is you creating the table. Though no, there's no information in the table yet, but at this level, you are just creating the table. And so the first SQL query we are executing. So this is by standard the SQL query that you have, but the every extra thing you have is now because you are running it inside of Python. All right. So now if I run this, the table will be created inside of the database, right? Because of course this cursor, the cursor is already connected to the database. That was what happened here. So the cursor is connected to the cursor. That conn is what we also created here to connect to the database. So you are using the cursor inside of that connect now, and then from that cursor you're executing this Python query, and with this output now the deed is done. So you have created the table, though it's an empty table because the database was freshly created. Now the table has been freshly created, so you can create more tables inside of the same database. So this is the users table we have created. Now we could create other tables as we go on, right? So the next thing you want to do is you want to insert data into the table. So once a table is created, you can insert data into it. For example, inserting a user into the users table. All right. So the table is called users, just like you see up here now. So create table if the table does not exist, the table of users with ID, which is integer, and primary key, name, which is text, and age, which is integer. All right. So here, you don't want to run another query. So you want to insert a user into the users table. So what you are going to do is, of course, you do cursor.execute, and then this is the standard SQL or SQL command now. So you now insert into users. So there's a table called users already. Insert into users. So you have name, comma, age with values. I mean, this will be explained. I think. Oh, I thought oh, yeah. I think this will be explained down now. So with this now, so you now have. So for the table has three things: ID, name, and age. So so insert into users name, age, values with some question mark, and then the name should be John Doe. The age should be 30. All right. So the ID, I believe the ID will be automatically generated. And then once you execute this now, then you commit the changes to the database to make sure that it is registered on the database. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if I run it 5 times, it will commit the same information to the database 5 times. So I hope I'll be able to demonstrate that before this is over. All right. So now run it has run and it's working. So in the above example, we use parameterized queries. So this is these are parameterized queries with question mark. So, and we use that to prevent SQL injection. We also use the con.commit to save the changes to the database. So without this commit now, you don't save it to the database. This may not be the same if you're using like Oracle 9J or other platforms, right? Or you're using MySQL on other platforms. So here you need to commit it. If not, it won't be saved. Okay, so the next thing we are doing is now, we so far we've created a database called my example. What's that now? Yeah, I think it's my underscore database underscore one. We just created that. Inside that, we created a table called users with ID, name, and age. Now we have registered an information on it, which is John Doe, somebody's name with age that who is aged 30. So now from that table, to know if you have really done that, you now want to fetch data from the database. Databases are for storing, retrieving, and managing data. Those are like some key things that databases help us with. So you want to fetch data from the database. So to retrieve data from the database, you can use SQL queries with the cursor. So we use cursor because we are using it. We are using SQL inside of Python. Don't forget. So again, you see that every SQL query we want to make, every SQL query we want to make is with cursor.execute. So here now I want to select every select star from users. So select star, this star tells you every user available. We want to have them all, right? That's what that is about. So once you do that, you now fetch all rows from the executed query. So you need all the rows, none is left. So results now, so you now have this variable name to say cursor.fetch all. So that's for all rows. So you can now print the result now. So for row in results, you print the row. So now we have only one row because we only have John Doe, who is 30, saved on in the table. So if I run this, so you see the ID is automatic. So the primary key is automatic. It cannot be duplicated. Then you have John Doe, and the John Doe is 30, like that. So the cursor.fetch all method fetches all rows returned by the query, and we print each row. Now, just like I said before, right? The interesting thing about databases here is if you are sure you don't want to save John Doe twice, just make sure you don't run it more than once in this session. All right. So for instance, if I go back now and run this John Doe again, you discover that by the time you fetch it again, the John Doe would appear twice. Okay. So and as far as the database is concerned, the second John Doe is another person entirely of the same age. So you want to be sure that you don't mistakenly keep running. Now run it the third time. If I come back here, I have John Doe appearing the third time. So these three John Does are not the same as far as the database is concerned because they have unique IDs, which are primary keys, and primary keys are unique to each uh person, to each user in the table. So once you have done all you need to do, you can now close the connection, right? So once you are done interacting with the database, always close the connection. How do you close connection? So you just say conn.close, and that's how you close connection. So that the database it's more like you're done in a house, you are done in your store, you just close it up. You have done retrieving things and managing things there, then you just close it and move. So I just run this, then the database is closed. So this ensures that resources are released and there are no open connections to the database. All right. So this is important so that nobody else, for instance, strays into your database, right? Or strays into your. It's more like a private place. You want only people that have. I remember one of the things I learned back then was about roles and privileges. So different people have different access. If you have a manager, if you have a manager and then there are supervisors and then like that, so the manager has some roles and privileges that more than the supervisor, and the supervisor has more roles and privileges compared to people working under the supervisor, like that. So you don't want to have access beyond what your office requires, right? So yeah, so now we want to do a complete example of everything we have done, just one blue. Mind you, I did the first one in my database one, so I'm doing this whole thing now in database two. So but as you already know, so far we only have database. We only have my database, my underscore database underscore one. That's all we have so far. So now I want to do everything again and save it to database two. So again, so everything we've said so far, right, is coming up again. So import SQLite 3, connect to the database, which or create it if it doesn't exist. So as far as the name the database, it will connect to it if it exists already. If it doesn't exist, it will create it automatically. You now create a cursor with which you refer to the database, right? With which you point at the database technically. And then the next thing is in line 7, you create a table if it doesn't exist also. So you say cursor executes so cursor.execute is like standard to run SQL queries in Python. So create table if not exist users, same thing like we did before. We're only doing it once. So if you have more names, you can also do that right now, right? So in this case, so insert data into the table. So cursor.execute, insert into user. So now been doing John Doe since maybe other, we can now do other names. Let's say, okay, let me put my own name in it. All right. So Emmanuel, Dansu, uh, okay, I mean, there are many Emmanuel Dansus. Let me say, I'm Emmanuel J. Dansu. Let me say there's an Emmanuel G. Dansu, so to speak, and the person is 26 years old. Then you can now commit in line 20. So you can then query and display all users now by just saying cursor.execute, select from users. Users is cursor.fetch all the rows, and then you run this now, and then this is what you get. So you just have one Emmanuel G. Dansu, who is 26. Okay, so you can keep doing this over and over again. So you can even insert multiple names as you're going to see later. So if I run this one again, it will give me it will add another name to the database, right? So for instance, let's say there's now an Emmanuel K. Dansu who is 32. Okay, who is 32. If I run it again, you see it doesn't erase what was there before, it only updates it with this new one. So let's now say let's say I have uh I have Clara White. If there's somebody like Clara White who is uh 40 32. Oh, why 32? Who is 42? Okay. So it doesn't delete what you have there before, it just updates. So that's why it's a database, right? So it keeps updating it, despite the fact that I've changed the names here. But once it is committed to the database, you have to delete it for it to be deleted. So any other thing you do, then of course, as you're going to see later, there are other ways of is putting multiple information on your database. So that's the beauty of this one. So let me go as far as maybe adding 10 names. Of course, this is still a crude way of adding these names. As we move on further, you'll understand better. So let me add random names, right? Let me add um 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 um, um Wanion Wanion Onfovu Wanion Onfovu. I add Wanion Onfovu, right? Okay, also 42. My bad, it's already there. Then maybe we want to add uh Seho Seho uh Ahwamenu, who is say 33. So we have five, right? Okay, let me just stop with this five, right? So now that's what we have in database two. So um interestingly, I can also even play with this. If I change this one to database one, all right. Mind you, in database one, we already have John Doe like three times. So if I change this one to database one and I'll run it, so you see it's going to add, so it's going to have John Doe, all the three John Does and the Sehu menu that I just have here now. So once you have it inside there, it's there. So if I change it to two again, I'm going to have Sehu twice. You see, that's so you have to be sure what you really want to commit to it and what you don't want to commit to it. So now I have six people, though the last two, it's exactly the same name, but as far as the database is concerned, there are two distinct people like that. So this program, what we have done now, it creates the users table. If it doesn't exist, it inserts a new user named John Doe, and all the other names have added to it. Then you have queries and it queries all users and prints them, and then it closes the database connection, right? And with this, we come to the end of this interesting one. This is how so you can connect SQL to Python to SQL database by using SQLite. In the next video, we'll see how we can connect Python to SQL database using SQL Alchemy, which even does more advanced stuff as we're going to see pretty soon. So let me know in the comment section how helpful this video is for you. And don't forget, you can download all my code sheets by following the link. The link you find in the description, whether on Facebook or on YouTube. So you can download the code sheets and follow along. That's what I always advise. So as I'm doing it, you do it along so you can also understand. So because you actually code by coding, you don't watch videos, and by the time it's time to implement, you're tired or you have lost interest. So so download first and then follow. Very important. So let me also know if there's something you have an idea, you have a suggestion, you have something you'd like me to do. Feel free to let me know. If I'm able to do it, I'll do that. Then don't forget to, uh, I mean, if you have subscribed already, thank you. If you have not subscribed, you'll be missing a lot because there's a lot more coming. So be sure to subscribe and don't forget to like. I mean, to hit the notification bell so you can always get alerted each time a new video is released. Also, like and share so that more people can have access to this great content I have going on here. Till I come your way again, keep doing data right. Bye.